Okay, yeah, that's picking up. Good afternoon, everybody, and a very warm welcome on a rather chilly day, although not as cold as it has been, so be grateful for that, perhaps. But we gather today to mark this very important day of remembrance on Holocaust Memorial Day, on the day that we are gathering here with dear friends from across our city, friends from our Jewish community and from many other faith and community groups, as we stand together on this day against discrimination, prejudice and oppression. I'm delighted to welcome the Vice Lord Lieutenant of Cambridgeshire, Benjamin Damazar, and your wife Liz. It's lovely to have you both with us today, and also our Deputy Mayor, Councillor Nick Sanford, and representatives of our civic life and council. You are all most welcome to us to gather here with us today. And welcome also to all the rest of our congregation. It's wonderful to gather, and each one of you is a special blessing to us in this service and to our city. At the end of this service, we will lay a wreath at the memorial stone in St John's Square, and you're all welcome to join for that too. And of course, do stay for refreshments afterwards to warm up, I'm sure. This evening we have an additional event this year to mark the day. We're going to hear some unforgettable stories and memories and music. We'll hear some letters being read from survivors, and you're all welcome to that at 6:30, and do please share that with others to know about it too. The theme for this year's Holocaust Memorial Day is ordinary people. Ordinary people were involved in all aspects of the Holocaust, in the Nazi persecutions and in the genocides in Cambodia, Rwanda, Bosnia and Darfur. Ordinary people were perpetrators, bystanders, rescuers, witnesses, and ordinary people were victims. And now, ordinary people such as ourselves can play our part in challenging discrimination, intolerance and persecution today. And tomorrow, on the actual day of remembrance, we are asked to hold a special moment at 4 o'clock along with people across all of the UK, to mark a moment of light against the darkness. And at 4 o'clock tomorrow, everyone is invited to put a candle safely, of course, if you can, in your windows. Do you remember we did that quite a bit, didn't we, in lockdown? And so if you are able to do that at 4 o'clock tomorrow, to light a candle as we remember those who were murdered for who they were, and to demonstrate our determination to stand against prejudice and hatred of all kinds. And so as our service begins, we're going to light a candle here to remind us that the light shines in the darkness, and when we stand together, the darkness will not overcome the light. I'm now going to invite Graham Berkman from the Peterborough Liberal Jewish community to speak to us as we begin this service today. Did you want to speak from the left?
What is man? O Lord, what is man that you regard him, or the Son of Man that you take account of him? Man is like a breath. His days are like a passing shadow. You sweep men away, they are like the dream, like grass which is renewed in the morning. In the morning it flourishes and grows, but in the evening it fades and withers. The years of our lives are 70, or even, by reason of special strength, 80. Yet their pride is but toil and trouble. They are soon gone, and we fly away. So teach us to treasure our days, and we may get a wise heart. Observe the good man and behold the upright. For there is immortality for the man of peace. Surely God will ransom my soul from the grave. He will then accept me. The Lord redeems the souls of his servants. None of those who take refuge in him will be condemned. Dust returns to the earth as it was, but the Spirit returns to God who gave it.
Let us now join together in heart and mind in our longings, hopes and dreams, and if you will, be willing to join together also in a prayer. This prayer was written jointly by the Chief Rabbi, the Archbishop of Canterbury, and the Senior Imam. So let us pray. Loving God, we come to you with heavy hearts, remembering the 6 million Jewish souls murdered during the Holocaust. In the horrors of that history, when so many groups were targeted because of their identity, and in genocides which follow, we recognize destructive prejudices that drive people apart. Forgive us, O God, when we give space to fear, negativity and hatred of others, simply because they are different from us. In your light, O God, help us see everyone as equally precious manifestations of your divinity, and help us to know the courage to face the darkness and live as people of light. Lord, through our prayer and through our actions, may we stand together with all those who are suffering, so that light may banish darkness, and love prevail over hate, and good triumph over evil. Amen. I'm now going to invite Qasim Iqbal and Ellie Hutchins, head boy and head girl of St John Fisher Catholic High School, who are going to lead us through our service today and to introduce our speakers.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Qasim Iqbal, and I am the head boy of St. John Fisher.
Hello, my name is Ellie Hutchings, and I am head girl at St. John Fisher. We would like to begin with welcoming Janet Berkman, Chair of Peterborough Liberal Jewish Community, who will be delivering from Berlin with love.
If you are very observant, when you walk down Bundesplatz in Berlin, you will spot 2 small brass plaques set into the pavement outside number 15. They are Stolpersteins, literally stumble stones, and commemorate the lives of 2 people who lived in one of the apartments there, Friedrich and Elsa Schapsky. Friedrich and Elsa were ordinary people. In 1938, they were living ordinary lives. Friedrich had a shop which sold high-class homewares such as lead crystal glass, and Elsa was a housewife. They had 1 child, a son, Oscar, who was 14 years old. But their lives were already changing. Oscar had been expelled from school for being a Jew, and all the family were required to wear a yellow Star of David on their clothing. Then, on the 9th of November, Kristallnacht happened, when the Nazis instigated a series of brutal attacks on Jewish homes, businesses, and people. Life changed dramatically for them. Friedrich was arrested, and Elsa knew that they were no longer safe. But in extraordinary times, ordinary people do extraordinary things. It was the 1st of December. Elsa took Oscar to Friedrichstrasse station and put him on the first Kindertransport train. They would never see each other again. Oscar and 195 other children arrived in Harwich on the 2nd of December, and after being housed in the Dovercourt camp, went to Leeds, sponsored by the Jewish community, who had offered sanctuary to several of the refugees. The rather grand-sounding Edelman's Continental Hotel, brackets kosher, became a hostel for the Kindertransporters. Several Jewish families each paid a few shillings a week towards their living costs. As a 14-year-old, Oscar was old enough to earn a living and found a job at Burton's clothing factory and was trained as a designer and pattern cutter. You would think that by now he would be safe. But after Germany had invaded France, Belgium, and the Netherlands in 1940, the British government thought otherwise. He, along with many other people of German birth, was declared an enemy alien and interned on the Isle of Man. Again, the Jewish community in Leeds rallied round and succeeded in convincing government officials that a 16-year-old boy posed no threat to national security, and he returned to his job at Burton's in Leeds and was given a home by a Jewish family. At some point after the war, he decided to change his surname to a more English-sounding one. He subsequently explained this as a practical move, stating that those who can pronounce it can't spell it, and those who can spell it can't pronounce it. So Ossie, Oscar Siegfried Schapski, to give him his full name, became Oscar Conway. In 1957, he married my husband's cousin, Phyllis Morris, who came from one of the many Jewish families who had arrived in Leeds during the early 1900s, fleeing the pogroms in Russia. They had 2 children, a son, Stuart, and a daughter named Elsa, in memory of his mother. They were happy in Leeds, but in the 1960s, cheap imports from the Far East began to impact the garment industry in the UK, and short-time working and layoffs became more frequent. The Australian government was actively seeking immigrants, and Phyllis's brother and his family had already made the move to Melbourne. Oscar and Phyllis made the brave decision to join them under the scheme that became known as the £10 POMS, and arrived in Melbourne late in 1969. Oscar quickly found well-paid work, and they settled well into their new life. The Stolpersteins record that Oscar's parents, Friedrich and Elsa, died during the war after they were transported to the Lodz ghetto. Oscar lived a much longer life. He died in 2015 at the age of 91. That life was entirely thanks to his mother's decision to send him away from Berlin with love. In extraordinary times, ordinary people do extraordinary things. Zecher Tzadik Livracha. May the memory of the righteous be a blessing.
We will now be hearing from Thomas Robinson from the Young Technicians Academy with River Flows in You.
Unfortunately, Dr. Jaspal Singh couldn't make it today, so instead I would like to introduce Reverend Michelle Dallaston with Holocaust and Faith Matters.
Jaspal has asked me to pass on his apologies for not being able to be with us today. There's been a sudden bereavement in his family, and the family are devastated by the loss of Jaspal's younger brother, Sukhwant Singh. Our thoughts and love and prayers are with Jaspal and the family at this sad time. Jaspal writes, 6 million ordinary people were murdered by the Nazis in this horrific genocide, their only crime being born into the Jewish faith. The perpetrators of this crime were also once ordinary people who became anti-Semitic, racist and evil. The 6 million ordinary Jews who were murdered demonstrated extraordinary acts of solidarity, resistance and perseverance through their faith and prayer. In this light, today, ordinary people must be alert to the dangers of anti-Semitism, racism and intolerance, and strive to combat the evil of genocide in our world. Have we learnt from this horrific genocide? I think not, for many have continued to follow. Peterborough Interfaith Council believes that an attack on one faith is an attack on all faiths, as they leave and enter the one house of the Almighty. On Holocaust Memorial Day, we all have a role to play as ordinary people to ensure that we learn from the past to create a safer, better future for all. Our thoughts and prayers are with all those who lost their lives in the many genocides in our world. God bless you all.
Now we will be hearing from Assistant Chief Constable Vicky Evans from the Cambridgeshire Police.
It's an honour to be invited here today to recognise this important remembrance service. And we must always ensure that the victims of the horrendous atrocities, not only of the Holocaust, but other genocides, are never forgotten. Because it's in their memory that we strive to make our community stronger, more inclusive, and that we constantly challenge ourselves and everyone around us to think how we can be better and how we can ensure that such things do not happen again. We talk today about ordinary people. And as we've heard from some of our previous speakers, ordinary people is all of us. But it's ordinary people like us that participate in, allow, and turn away from the things that we have seen happen in the past. And we have to challenge ourselves to think, how as ordinary people do we become those extraordinary people that stand up against hate, stand together and support those who are marginalised or victimised, and be the ones that give the strong voice and the strength to those who sometimes don't have that voice or are prevented from having that voice and being able to speak up for themselves. It's a challenge that all of us need to consider. How do we make ourselves as ordinary people, those extraordinary people that make a difference? We're blessed in Peterborough with strong and vibrant communities. We come together, and we know from many of the events that lots of us attend that we have communities that come together. But unfortunately, we do have minorities, as all communities do, who still, despite all of the lessons that we should have learnt, continue with hatred and oppression of those who they feel are different. The challenge for all of us is to understand why. Why do those people do that? And how can we stand up and prevent them from doing it in the future? It's hugely important that we and all of our communities stand together as one against all forms of hate, and that each of us take that responsibility to be that extraordinary person as we go about our day-to-day lives. Challenge that inappropriate behaviour. Challenge people's views when you can see that actually they are pushing that narrative of hate and oppression. Report unacceptable behaviour and think about how, leading by example, we can show how we come together as a strong, cohesive community who supports one another, no matter what our different views. In the constabulary, we take hate crime exceptionally seriously, and we strive through 3 strands to try and support you all and all of our communities to stand against hate. What we most predominantly want to do is prevent hatred. We want to try and build communities where it's just not acceptable to tolerate that sort of behaviour, and educate those who think that it is acceptable, and help people understand the strength in difference, what it brings to our communities and makes us stronger and more vibrant. We can do that through events like these. We can do that by talking to people. And we can do that through our schools, our young people, and all of us continuing with those messages. We work alongside our colleagues in the Safer Peterborough Partnership to ensure that wherever possible, that joint message is given to all of our communities. Engaging with our communities is hugely important, and allowing people to have a voice so that we know if these terrible things are happening and we can do things about them. And also each of us standing up, and if those people aren't strong enough to report or come forward, finding ways that they can through our third-party agencies, our charity, our volunteers, and just through members of our communities. Again, it's about giving those people a voice when perhaps because of what they've been subjected to, they may not feel strong enough at that point in time to come forward. And at the far end of the scale, when we can't educate people, we can't prevent, then what we must do is ensure that we pursue those who push the hateful narrative. And we need to do that in honour of the people that have been subjected to these atrocities over the years. Because if we don't, then we're failing in their memory. And that's something that to us simply isn't acceptable. I'm mindful that as we stand here, we are in difficult times. We see cost of living crisis and other things impacting and affecting on our communities. So now we need to be stronger than ever. We need to ensure that all of our communities come together, that we're looking out for the people who might be struggling more than us, who are different from us, that we use all of our communities and we come together, because unfortunately history tells us that sometimes it's in the difficult times where hatred can grow. So I finish today with that plea, really, the absolute support from us as a constabulary to you as our communities, but also a plea for all of your support, that we all challenge ourselves to be those ordinary people who take that extraordinary step and ensure that we drive hate out of our communities in Peterborough. Thank you.
We would now like to introduce Peterborough Pride with experience of the LGBTQIA+ community during the Holocaust.
I'd just like to apologise for Teddy, the drag queen, who was going to be doing this speech. I'm afraid she's not well. So my name is Vicky. I'm, as well as helping with Peterborough Pride, I'm an inclusive member on the General Synod, the Church of England's Parliament, and I also run Inclusive Church Peterborough and Inclusive Peterborough, the social group. So we've been asked to say a few words on the plight of LGBTQIA+ Jews, but specifically gay Jews in the Holocaust. Many of you will know that we as a community were branded with a pink triangle like the one I'm wearing today. Throughout my talk, I may use the full acronym of LGBTQIA+, or simply queer, as a reclaimed term. Also, finally, before I begin, I must give a trigger warning, as some topics I speak about may be hard for some of you to hear. At the beginning of the 1920s, LGBTQIA+ people were tolerated more in Berlin than the rest of the world, considering that the rest of the world, it was still criminalized to be gay. But in 1929, the criminalization of being gay was being decriminalized in German literature. However, as we quickly found out, that was not to last. In merely 4 years, the Nazis had ransacked, pillaged, and destroyed much of the queer culture of not only Germany, but other surrounding countries that Germany had annexed. This culture has never been recovered. Like other Jews, gay pink triangle wearers were separated, gruesomely experimented on, castrated, and killed en masse. And after 1935, lesbians were also given the same treatment as gay men. Being female and queer hit them twice as hard as their gay male counterparts. Lesbians were given no part in society whatsoever. Unfortunately for our brothers and sisters, even though our history books tell us that the Allied forces liberated all Jewish prisoners, they did not. They left the queer community in the camps. The majority were transferred to other prisons to serve their sentences. Moreover, when looking at repatriations, all gay and lesbian Jewish people were not seen as people at all. They were told to bury their experiences. This came about because of paragraph 175, which was introduced into German law. It was adjusted in 1935 to include lesbians as well. This paragraph stripped queer people of rights. And once the war was over, the government of the Allied forces, Germany and Austria, upheld paragraph 175, keeping queer people and their experiences anonymous, as if they never existed at all. This kind of treatment has since been used to cover up many other queer issues, including the AIDS epidemic of the 80s and 90s, and even the monkeypox virus that is still around today. Every other Nazi persecution measure was withdrawn, bar paragraph 175. However, not all was bleak for our queer brothers and sisters. Many queer people were able to survive through marriage to other queer people, and then were able to escape to less threatening nations. But this still is a very dark time for the queer community, one that has never truly been brought into the light until recently. Over 15,000 men accused of homosexuality died in concentration camps. If you wish to find out more about queer people and their struggle throughout the whole Holocaust, I implore you to read through your local libraries or bookshops, online, through Stonewall, or the Holocaust Memorial website. Thank you.
We will now be hearing from Kelsey Forrester and Taylor Carr from the Young Technicians Academy, and they will be performing What I Did for Love by Marvin Hamlish.
Kiss today, goodbye. The sweetness and the sorrow. Wish me luck the same to you. But I can't regret what I did for love, what I did for love. Look, my eyes are dry. The gift was ours to borrow. It's as if we always knew. But I can't forget what I did for love, what I did for love. God, love is never gone as we travel on. Love's what we'll remember. Kiss today goodbye and point me towards tomorrow. We did what we had to do. Won't regret, can't forget what I did for love, what I did for love, what I did for love. Love is never gone as we travel on. Love's what we'll remember. Kiss today goodbye and point me towards tomorrow. We did what we had to do. Won't regret, can't forget what I did for love, what I did for love, what I did for love.
I would now like to introduce Eva Woods, Youth MP of Peterborough with social media Invisible and Radical.
So when I was thinking about how best to represent young people in this conversation, I thought it was really important to consider what makes our generation different when it comes to radicalisation and hate, and that's the online world. Because it's easy to think that with the online world, we've dissolved barriers. We're now able to call out and condemn genocides across the world, to know what's going on and to stand with activists who we share no identity with and we've never met. It's easy to unite ourselves around a common cause in the pursuit of love across the world, easier than it's ever been. But what we don't often consider is that the online world sometimes lets us become more boxed in and more blinkered than we've ever been before. We all know what algorithms are. We all know how they control us and how they channel us into groups of people who we do have things in common with, and it begins innocently. But the more we show interest and the more we respond and engage and interact in the online world, the easier it is to channel us into spaces where everyone agrees with us. And there's no room for counter-argument. There's no room for difference. We become trapped in silent spaces, silent radical spaces, because they know that's what draws us in. We're attracted to the strongest views that closely resemble ours, and we end up with no contact with anybody who is different to us in any way, which is the opposite of what the online world intended to achieve. We reach a stage where we even think that strangers in the online world know us better than those around us in the real world. I've spoken to many parents who would argue that they know their children better than anyone else in the whole planet. But if you ask their child, they might say, for argument's sake, that a figure like Andrew Tate understands them best because somebody on the internet with radical views that reach apart inside a person that they've never been able to share in the real world because of rules we have about what we are and aren't allowed to say in order to protect other people from being hurt by what comes out of our mouths. The online world is a world without scrutiny. So it's easy to feel like we're connecting with people through a radical channel, which actually is a very good reason why that doesn't exist in the real world. And it's easy to feel like radical voices understand us better than the moderate voices we come into contact with on a day-to-day basis. And what we see here is history working its way in spirals, because what came into my mind when I was writing this speech was the use of ghettos in Nazi Germany when the Holocaust came into play. Because the purpose of the ghettos, it wasn't just to separate segments of society and that was it. It's because those who were making those decisions knew full well that when you separate groups of people from one another to the point where they have no contact, they will believe anything that you say about a group of people that you've never met. It's easy to construct lies and demonize a group of people when, in the case of Nazi Germany, those who were considered Aryan had no contact with those who were being demonized. They had no source to information that would challenge that. And that's how ordinary people become complicit, when they're fed lies and they see no counter-argument. So, how this should change our behaviour in the world today, we need to give young people, especially the people who spend most of their time in the online world, the people who have a culture where most of their most meaningful interactions don't always take place between people who they know in our existence, it's in the existence online. We need to give them a space where it's balanced and open and they're able to have interactions open, balanced and diverse interactions, and they're able to see from their real existence in our world the importance of meeting different people and the importance of not being locked into a community where everything about you is the same, because that's how we develop hatred. And there's a reason why the tragedies of the Holocaust weren't known around the rest of the world until after the fall of the Nazi regime. And there's a reason why amongst those who were considered Aryan Germans, the horrors of the Holocaust weren't necessarily known until after the fall of the regime, because of that separation, because they did not come into contact with those who were the victims of that violence. And that's why denazification was such a long process. So, what we have to take away from this is that ordinary people are the ones who will become the perpetrators in these crimes of conformity. Ordinary people are the ones who will continue to spread lies and propaganda when they're given no opportunity to question it. So in our interactions, our political interactions and our social interactions, we should always be asking questions. Any narrative that has no opposition will likely lead to hatred. We need to question everything. And it's okay to feel anger. It's okay to feel betrayal. But it's never okay to feel hatred. Because when two groups become polarized and one is given power, that's how genocides occur. Thank you.
would now like to introduce the Year 9 students from Marshfield School with First They Come by Martin Nymuller.
The poem is called First They Came. First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out because I am not a trade unionist.
Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and there was no one to speak for me.
We will now be hearing from Vice Lord Lieutenant for Cambridgeshire, Mr. Benjamin de Mazza.
Last year, those of you who were here may remember my describing my family's history at Auschwitz, what happened to my aunt, uncle, and the shooting of Lydia, the girl who could have been my cousin. They were ordinary people. During the Holocaust, millions of ordinary people, including Jews, Romani, homosexuals, people with disabilities, and political opponents of the Nazi regime, were persecuted and murdered by the German government and its collaborators. These individuals were targeted for extermination due to their perceived racial inferiority, according to Nazi ideology. They were ordinary people. Many were forcibly rounded up and sent to concentration camps, where they were subjected to forced labour, medical experimentation, and execution. In many places, the persecution of Jews occurred against a backdrop of centuries of anti-Semitism. Ordinary people behaved in a variety of ways during the Holocaust. In Germany, many individuals who were not zealous Nazis nonetheless participated in varying degrees in the persecution and murder of Jews and other victims. Following German occupation, countless ordinary people in other countries also cooperated in the persecution of Jews. We should remember that many of those ordinary people were also complicit in the Holocaust through their actions or inaction, such as by reporting their Jewish neighbours to the authorities or profiting from the confiscation of Jewish property. Motives ranged from pressures to conform and defer to authorities, peer pressure, to opportunism and greed, to pure hatred. Some landlords and neighbours denounced tenants or other individuals for private behaviour that they observed. This included the crime of racial defilement, relations between Jews and persons of German or related blood, or violations of the German criminal code, which explicitly prohibited homosexuality. Germans who did not play an active role responded to Jewish persecution in diverse ways. Large numbers went along passively with the exclusion of Jews from their workplaces and with their isolation within schools and communities. Others cheered as onlookers at public parades to shame those accused of racial defilement. Everywhere there were witnesses on the sidelines who cheered on the active participants in persecution and violence. Most, however, remained silent. Nazi policies and actions, combined with the responses of elite and ordinary Germans, culminated in the near total isolation of Jews from German society by late 1938. However, few spoke out. The same was true during the deportations of Jews from Germany and its occupied territories after World War II had begun. In areas where the deportations did provoke some discontent, Nazi propagandists simply strengthened their efforts to promote acceptance of the removal of the enemy within, supported by sympathisers, again, ordinary people. The Holocaust remains one of the most tragic and brutal chapters in human history. Those who perished were just ordinary people.
Now we are hearing from the Deputy Mayor.
The Holocaust Memorial Day is commemorated nationally and internationally each year on the 27th of January. For several years, Peterborough has held its own service during Holocaust Memorial Week, offering a public and interfaith act of remembrance not only of the Holocaust of World War II, but many other acts of genocide, discrimination, and oppression throughout the world, throughout history, and in our lives today. Each year, the Holocaust Memorial Trust announces a specific theme that will steer events towards a shared focus and provides the stimulus for exhibitions, services, and a range of commemorative service activities. This year's theme is Ordinary People. As the theme this year is Ordinary People, this can prompt us to think of ourselves and everyone around us that could actively play a part in stopping any type of discrimination, persecution of prejudice that we may witness happening around us in everyday life. Over the centuries, loving families have been slaughtered during international conflict. All these were ordinary people. Races have been persecuted and destroyed because of their creed or colour, and just over 70 years ago, the most notorious, the most vicious regime in the history of our planet exterminated millions of innocent people during the Second World War. The perpetrators of this evil were ordinary people who used their power to inflict terrible pain on innocent, ordinary people. The victims of the genocide were just ordinary people who were identified by the perpetrators, who were again just ordinary people, for perhaps simply they had something that the perpetrators didn't like. These parameters were based on whatever they liked, rather than an actual aspect of someone's identity. Man's capability to inflict evil upon each other has no boundary. Let no one suspect that colour or culture, race or religion are our enemies. The enemy is the evil that lurks inside the human skin of ordinary people, the evil of bigotry, the evil of power in the wrong hands, and the evil of prejudice. Our Holocaust Day is about reflection and remembrance. To remember the millions of desperate souls who have perished so needlessly across time all over the world. But for me and others, I undertake that pledge about learning from the past and doing everything I can and we can to understand and change the present. After all, we are all just ordinary people. Thank you.
I would now like to introduce Leon King with Sarah Band, second cello, suite in D minor.
We will now hand over to the Reverend Michelle Dallaston, who will close the commemoration.
We have applauded some of our speakers and performers this afternoon, but not all of them. And I think maybe now would be an appropriate moment to thank them all for their words to us as we say thank you today. And of course, we ought to also say thank you to Ellie and to Qasim, who have led us so beautifully through this service today. Thank you. And also to the students from St Thomas More who put on a drama performance in the Guildhall as well for us. Thank you. We have heard so much already today that has challenged us, that has encouraged us, that has moved us deeply and has inspired us too. And I urge you to continue in a similar vein in the rest of this week and as we carry on together in this city. Let us find those spaces and places of togetherness, that radical inclusion that we need to find, most especially in these challenging days that we are all living through. As St John's here, we are an inclusive church, and I'm so glad that we offer actively that welcome to everybody, and we are one of the community support hubs here in the city. And please do come and talk to us and find that space here, young and old, of every faith community, of every situation in life. Please come and meet with us. On Tuesdays we're open all day. There is food for everyone. Friday lunchtimes, and we are trying to be open every day of every week as we go forward. So please come and let us use this glorious space as a reminder of the all-encompassing love of God that as Christians we see in Christ, but we share together no matter what our faith or circumstance. Let us use our places and our hearts to find that way to speak to one another, to make sure that things do not get lost and forgotten and siloed, so that hate may be pushed out and love may overwhelm and encompass us all. That is my prayer and my hope for us as we stand together on this time of remembrance. There are many other ways across the city to engage in this Holocaust Memorial Day and its time of commemoration. If you haven't already gathered, there is a very fine exhibition at the museum called Absence and Loss, photographs by Marion Davis. It's there until the 18th of February, so do go along and see that. And do check the Holocaust Memorial Day Trust website, where you'll find other ways to continue this time of commemoration and remembrance. So in a moment we're going to go out through the west doors and lay a wreath on the Holocaust Memorial Stone. You are all welcome, as I said at the beginning, to join us for that and to stay for refreshments. Don't forget to light your candle of hope and of light against the darkness tomorrow at 4 o'clock. But before we depart, before this service concludes, may I ask you, if you are able, to stand as we ask for God's blessing upon us all. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord shine the light of his love upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord look kindly upon you, upon those we have remembered today, and upon all our world. And may there be peace